Thank you. Morning.
Morning.
And I'm used to participation because I'm a public school teacher by day, so I'm used to a little bit of interaction, but interruption, no. Students do not interrupt. My name is David Friedman. I want to thank Sean Thomas and Cameron for inviting me to present. And when I was invited, I wasn't sure how what I'm doing fit in, just because it's not necessarily technology beyond the fact that I'm writing a blog. But I'm going to get into the history of the Disabled Foodie. And if you haven't seen my blog before, it's thedisabledfoodie.com. So with that, and my slides, I'll read them as well. There's not much in the way of visual. I tried to keep it as minimal as possible. So this slide is titled How the Disabled Foodie Began. And I'm not used to
Use
this.
the spacebar.
Space. Okay. So I just celebrated my first anniversary of the Disabled Foodie in August. In August of 2014, I was sitting with my husband in Radagast Hall and Beer Garden, which is in Williamsburg, which has really, really good food. But we were sitting there having this discussion that had been an ongoing conversation, and at that point I was about to go into the wheelchair. I'd been using crutches for 4 years, and I started using the wheelchair last November. But we were having this ongoing dialogue that we've been having about how it's so difficult and that there's no centralized resource for people with disabilities to go on and find out if a restaurant or food venue is accessible. So instead of continuing my Jewish fetching about it, I decided that I was going to make my best attempt to create a blog where I review restaurants not only on food and service, but accessibility. And to give you a little bit more about myself, I'm a special education teacher by day, so I have a little familiarity due to that with ADA and also IDEA, the laws that govern special education. So with that, I decided, starting at Radagast Hall, they were one of my first reviews. Them, and if you've been in that area, Williamsburg, Oddfellows ice cream, really good, but I still prefer Ample Hills. Definitely a fan of that. Ample Hills and Mass Brothers chocolate, I all reviewed that day. And I started that day. Definitely champion eaters, my husband and I. So the blog consists mostly of reviews of restaurants, food venues, but I also include news and features and articles of people with disabilities who work in the food world as they come to me. So I don't know if anyone's familiar with Yannick Benjamin. He's one of the top 30 sommeliers in the entire country. He uses a wheelchair, and that post has been my most popular post to date. It has over 800 hits, so it's been pretty popular. And let's see, okay. So I created a rating system, and what's involved in my rating system, it's kind of rudimentary, but I wanted to keep it as simple as possible. It's a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being the lowest and 5 being the highest. And I rate 4 areas numerically, and this is all done after my reviews are, the first part is I review the food itself to get you drooling, and then I get into the accessibility. So when I started, I've learned more things over time in terms of different populations within the disability community, and I continue to learn, which I've been criticized for, that I don't include this and I don't include that. At the beginning, I'm only able to review from my perspective on disability. As I've learned more, I'm trying my best to include that in my reviews. So my earlier reviews include basically mobility. As I'm learning, I'm including more. So the 4 areas I rated on, and I continue to rate on consistently, are the accessibility of the entrance, and I don't break out a tape measure, but gauging the width of the door, the smooth transition or not from the sidewalk into the restaurant. Is there a vestibule? Is it, basically, can you get in and how easily? Then the bathroom, which is a huge thing. And I was actually featured on the Sporkful podcast earlier this month. And I sat down with Dan Pashman, who runs that podcast, and John Hockenberry. I don't know if anyone's familiar with him. He has a podcast called The Takeaway, and he's also a wheelchair user. And his perspective was quite different than mine, that the bathroom isn't an issue if he can't access it, but he also kind of chose a facility, a restaurant to dine at that was 3 blocks from his house, but an hour and a half accessorized ride for me, from mine. But the bathroom, do they have an accessible stall? Are there grab bars? What's the lighting like in the bathroom? All of those features I'm including. Can you turn the wheelchair, make a 180-degree turn within the stall and within the bathroom? And then I review the walkways and the interior space. Is it passable? What are the lighting levels like? What's the noise level like? Is furniture adjustable or fixed? Because I know that's part of the ADA. There's stuff written, and I'll get into this later. There's stuff in ADA for restaurants about fixed furniture, but there's nothing about furniture that can be moved. So it's interesting. And then finally, and this is the biggest piece where I'll have the most to say, is the staff. Even though that's not part of ADA, it plays into your entire experience at the restaurant. So I'll get into that a little bit more. And then I started to include, I'm thinking spring of this year, started to include asking whether they have menus written in Braille. And I think all but one place I get looked at like I'm asking them to present me with a unicorn. And it's really unfortunate. Certain places where they change the menu regularly, I understand that it would be cost ineffective for them to print a Braille menu constantly, but some places have been open to the idea of then using technology to somehow get around that, and I've been engaged in conversations with certain restaurants about that. And at this point, I have more than 70 reviews to date. And if you haven't been on the blog, I have a page that's called Cumulative Accessibility Rating. And on that page, you can go through every place I've reviewed, and they're alphabetized and in point order from highest to lowest. And they're separated by places that are full-on restaurants and then places that are stores, because those places usually don't have bathrooms available, so that piece of the rating comes out. And then at the very bottom, I've been to a couple of food-related places, like the Culinary Arts Museum at Johnson and Wales in Rhode Island, and that doesn't fall into any of the categories, so I have kind of an other on that page, or you can just scroll through the home page and go through the reviews chronologically. So I have two major themes that I found out about at this point, and the first theme is ADA is a good start, but is it enough? Because ADA, in my opinion, it's great. They're trying to help the community. They're trying to make everything accessible, but in the over 70 reviews and experiences I've had, there have been areas where it's kind of gray, such as I had an event this past April with the Blind Ambition Coalition, where they came out to a talk at the Gansevoort Market with me, which if you haven't been, beats Chelsea Market. It's not crowded, the food is incredible, and it hasn't been discovered yet like Chelsea Market, so it's well worth a trip, and the food is just really good across all the different little booths they have there. But that was my first experience speaking with people in the blind community, and that's where I started thinking about Braille menus. And ADA, where it gets gray, says that as long as a restaurant has someone to read the menu to someone who is blind, that's okay. In speaking with people from the Blind Ambition Coalition, it came down to a matter of, wouldn't I rather be able to read the menu for myself than have what we call in the teacher world a read aloud, where it, for certain people, they said it brings focus onto them, it takes away a level of independence in certain people's opinion. So ADA isn't always enough. Again, ADA also, the idea of fixed furniture. There's all this measurement and regulation in ADA about a restaurant having furniture like a McDonald's or a Burger King, where you can't move it, it's bolted to the floor. They have regulations on that space, that there has to be X amount of space between furniture. As you can see with me in my wheelchair, I have to be able to pass through. So with that, they have lots of regulations for that. The minute you get into furniture that can be moved, it's a lot harder to find information, because I guess the assumption is, since it is movable, then you can make enough space, but you run into trouble in a restaurant that's small, because then if you do want to dine there, then there's the spatial issue of, will my wheelchair fit in the restaurant? But they'll claim they're accessible, but the walls are tight, or what have you. So it gets complicated, and it gets really, like I said, it gets gray. And these are issues that I keep encountering, and I'm sure many of you have encountered as well, in restaurants where ADA could always be improved. The other theme, which is the largest, is the staff and education that needs to happen. And what I wrote up here, and I stand by this is the key component to everything else, because if you have a staff that understands ADA and understands beyond ADA, and just understands treating humans equally, then you're moving toward a better restaurant experience. But the thing that I found is most staff is not in tune with the needs of the community. And the common experience that I have, I almost always call ahead. I don't identify myself, but I'll call, and usually the phone conversation goes like this. I'll say, is your restaurant and the bathroom in the restaurant, are they wheelchair accessible? I always get asked, what? Every time. Again, I'm asking them to present a unicorn. And you can be sure 99.999% of the time, the person you're reaching on the other end, from my perspective, is at least able-bodied. So right away you're asking them something to step out of their own experience. What you find is they'll say, either one, they'll say, automatically say, yes, it is. And if they say it really fast, I get skeptical. Because, and other wheelchair users I know have had the experience, they call up, they ask, and it's down 6 stairs. Or my quote-unquote favorite, meaning the least favorite, is, well, the restaurant's accessible, but the bathroom isn't. So I'm supposed to cross my legs and think happy thoughts, while everybody else can use the bathroom. Which according to ADA, that restaurant is accessible. In my opinion, I'll argue with ADA constantly, it's not. Because I don't have the same equal experience and opportunity in that restaurant that everybody else would. So what needs to happen is education of staff. In the restaurant world, I've spoken to chefs, I'm speaking to, let's see how many people know this name, Danny Meyer. Who knows Danny Meyer? That name, Shake Shack. I'm going to brag a little next Saturday, and then after Columbus Day weekend, the 2 following Saturdays, I was invited to speak at 3 Shake Shacks in Manhattan to start training their staff on improving how they interact with and treat people in the disability community. And Danny Meyer wrote me a thank you note, so I'm kind of fanboying over that. But he's committed to educating the staff. The thing that happens in the restaurant world is staff turnover is huge. So a lot of chefs and restaurateurs experts